Just going to slowly get started here because some people are coming a little later. And, you know, I was driving from the post office the other day and I had a poem in my mind, one of my own. How many folks in here have ever written a poem? Is there anyone in here who hasn't? Maybe this. Oh, you've written a poem? You have.
Never.
You get them in your mind, you know, and being a poet, you're a different kind of person. Oftentimes if you're home, you know, in your pajamas or whatever in the morning, you've had a cup of coffee, and nothing sounds better than your own poem at those times. It's wonderful. And I was coming back from the post office, and I was down there at 29th at the light stopped, and all these people were staring into my old funky truck. I realized I was performing. It was a good poem. People, I'm sure, would have enjoyed it. It was kind of a hilarious one, too. I was laughing out of control. I'm not driving my car again. I wanted to mention one thing. We have Tink, can't even pronounce them, Tinkstead and Rumble, who is an amazing couple who have won multiple Grammys for, she plays what is called the English clarinet, perhaps it's called, and he is guitar.
English horn.
English horn, thank you. And they kind of redo modern classics. But they're going to be here 2 nights, holiday show. It's going to be really nice, December 11th and 12th, which I think might be a Wednesday and Thursday. That will be a very special music concert. We have a lot of good music coming up, actors, poetry. If you're not on our schedule of events, please do get on them. Let's see if there was anything here. Oh, tomorrow. Tomorrow there's a celebration. Shirley Collins is a local photographer, and she has done a book. You see some of her photographs around the room. Women 55 plus. That's what it's called. Inspiring Women 55 plus. And eventually you get to be plus. But that's going to be a wonderful. Mayor Kitty is in the book. She'll be here talking. People, Machiko, lots of people we all know. And it's also a finger food potluck. So that's going to be a happy crowd. And I think with that, I'm going to bring up my cohort, the other side of the crosscut in my dreams. I mean, you know, that's okay, isn't it? This is the way it is. Who is going to take over tonight? Eric Muller.
The first word of the evening is chanterelles.
Yes.
Okay, people found those. Martha and Jerry, Smith River area, brought a box of them, and there are bags there if you want to take some home. Okay?
Yes.
And the second word is chant. Okay, so if you would join me in a poetry fight song, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so when I say something, I'd like it to come back strong. Okay? Poetry.
Poetry.
Poetry is.
Poetry is.
Poetry is all.
Poetry is all.
Poetry is all there.
Poetry is all there.
Poetry is all there is.
Poetry is all there is.
So come and get it.
So come and get it.
Sid Corman. With a little repeats added in. So chanterelle to chant, and to some thanks for Tsunami, that's sort of like the the beginning of any service here. It's thank you to Scott, but also thank you to the poets who have been here recently. Matthew Dickman, Jay Niebel, Jora LaFleur, somebody named Booker Rule, who has a poem, I Want to Get Pregnant. Do you know who I'm talking about? Scott. Anyway, good luck, Scott. It's not going to come about by doing crosscut saws, I'll tell you. Armand Tolentino from Portland was also here. And then Amanda Powell and Kit Seibert with brand new books from Finishing Line. That was a lovely reading the other day. And now we have 4 Valley poets, 2 from Down Valley. Now who are you? And 2 from Up Valley, from Portland and Eugene. And we'll get to them right away in this order. We'll have 2 readers, reading 20 to 25 minutes each. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back for our second set. It's going to be a long evening, but we have refreshments, and we have excellent, seasoned poets. If I brought all of their books with me tonight, I would have had to have an expedition pack. I selected for each one a book that I thought was not necessarily representative, but indicated a particular contribution to poetry culture of our region. So I want to feature that as I introduce each one. Ingrid Wendt is going to read first, Maggie Chula of Portland second, we'll break, Bill Silverley of Portland third, and then C will finish up, and she's from Eugene. Is that correct? We had some shuffling around beforehand. Is everybody on the same page? 20 to 25 minutes, intermission, refreshments?
Where's the hook?
The hook is your conscience, and also, you know, something might go off, some alarm or another. I want to introduce the first and second poets, and then sit down and enjoy as you do. Ingrid has 5 full collections since 1980, and the first was chosen and introduced by William Stafford for Boa Books, Moving the House. The second, Singing the Mozart Requiem, is that correct? Don't have all my titles written down here. Won the Oregon Book Award. The next couple, The Angle of Sharpest Ascending and Surgeon Fish, also got recognitions. And we'll be hearing from her 2011 book, and maybe others this evening, Even Song. Even Song is on the table, and so is another amazing little book that's in its 6th edition. Imagine that. A guide to writing in the classroom, starting with little things, and it's apparently a big success in terms of its use. And then the book that I brought along, which Ingrid edited with Primus St. John, is one of the 6 Oregon Literature series. This is a monumental series, and this is a key part of the structure for us poets. Some of us in the room are in it. I think it'll be a reference point for many, many years to come. So thank you for that, Ingrid. She's a teacher, a traveler, teaching from grade school to senior Fulbright Fellow in Germany. Her residences and travel have taken her to New Mexico, Finland, Italy, and I'm sure other places. Another thing that I noticed in looking over the 5 books is that she's an experimenter and a collaborator in her work. She's worked with sculptors and painters. As a musician herself, a singer and pianist, she has also thought about music in relation to what she does. I mean, we all do as poets, think about music, but she has an actual background in music, and that's important here. She's experimented, of course, with free verse. I'd say that's probably her major form, but there are sequences, learning the mother tongue, in which there are found items inserted, long and short pieces. In the new book, there are split couplets. I had never heard of that before, and villanelle. And in the book, The Sharpest Ascending Angle, there are stanzas, looks like a cube, and it's cut across like that. So you've got 2 triangles that are sort of facing one another. Very interesting innovation. She is a writer of conscience, and as a friend and tutee of William Stafford, that seems to follow. And she's motivated in part by her experience of her own German ancestry and exploring that. Peace and reconciliation, I would say, Ingrid's main concerns in the political work and activist work that she does. I look for those words that make everything right. Please welcome Ingrid, and she will be followed in 20-25 minutes by Maggie Chula, and then we'll take our break.
My thanks to Eric for that really lovely introduction. I'm honored. And it's wonderful to be here with Maggie and Bill and C sharing this podium today. And thank the rest of you for coming to give us a chance to read to you. Thank you very much. And Scott, as always, thank you for hosting. Eric just reminded me of a poem that I haven't looked at for a while, so I'm going to open with that. It's a poem titled Offerings, and it's the first one in Surgeon Fish. It's a poem that stands more or less as in place of an introduction or a foreword to the book. It's the first poem in the book, titled Offerings, and this was written for William and Dorothy Stafford after the suicide of their son. Offerings. When they passed the collection plate, and I asked, "Where does the money go?" my mother, ever certain, whispered, "To God, for His work." Those words were enough, though for years what use God had of money I couldn't guess. And when a young friend died, God wanted her too. Those days, all of us knew there was no question too great. Nothing the right word couldn't stop. Why led straight where we wanted to go. If only, never kept doubling back on itself. And courage was always a day we could step into from the right side of the bed. Now, when I learn of your grief, I look for those words that make everything right. These words, my whole heart is in them. This whisper, I pass it to you. I was very, very fortunate, as were many people in this room, to be a friend of William Stafford and Dorothy Stafford. Dorothy just passed away just a few weeks ago. And by association, occasionally we would encounter a member of their family who became friends too. The kind of friends you see like maybe once every year or two or three, but you pick up where you left off. This is for Kim Stafford and his wife Perrin, who got married when Ralph and I were we were living for a summer in Norway. And Eric mentioned that Ralph and I have traveled, and yes, I do write quite a bit about where we have been, and that you might hear a bit of that tonight too. We were in Norway that summer, and I wanted to do more than just send a card. So the title Epithalamion, as you probably know, it means a poem written on the occasion of a wedding. Epithalamion from Norway. Eden, Eden. But who would have dreamed Genesis here in the Arctic? Nordkapp, that tourist destination Ralph and I last month succumbed to. For hours, our little red rental car bearing us north, north, north. Noon at our backs, heaven, sea, darkness, light, rocks, smooth moons, marking the spot the land simply stops, insisting. Timberline sinking right into the sea. Or is it emerging? Friends, how long have we thought of the garden as jungle, as warm? Friends, I have dived in these waters. Cobalt blue of fjord, and a silent chorus of say, fish, iridescent around me, patient angels, watchful. Here the future begins. Here I have walked on waves of tundra, golden, with autumn lichen mosses and every shade of red and orange from sunrise to sunset, and here the future begins. Nightly, into the frozen sky, green wings of flame and white and blue spiral from the horizon, sway over my head, and again, it's Eden, it's heaven. Over and over the world begins. It is love, yours, these words, today, your own. That was cold water in that fjord. We're down to 115 feet. This poem owes something to a poem of Paul Ann Peterson's. I've been looking for a title for this one for such a long time, and we shared a reading together here at Tsunami, many years ago now. And she used these words, which I thought, perfect title. And I wrote them down right away. And it was in a part of another poem of hers, I can't tell you which one. But the title from Paul Ann is The History of Strife. And it is, as Eric mentioned, one of the poems that is, I am aware of injustice and call it when I see it. The History of Strife, a personal event here from Eugene. When your teenage daughter sent my teenage daughter home in tears, and not for the typical reasons, bad hair, fashion, boys, but for taking pride in starting to master the German tongue. My own parents had, since childhood, abandoned. Language of evil, Jew killer language. The birthright to vengeance was on your daughter's side, and she hurled it. And I, who haven't thought of this in years, having chosen not to blame you, the parents, blaming instead our cultural climate, the great human condition, I see you by chance, and here it is. The stone of this memory rises as stones are not supposed to do, and I am struck. My own rage rises, this earthly hunger to cast it back at you. Fellow teachers, colleagues, whose allegiance to words like mine has always been steadfast, whose hope, like mine, is to change the history of strife, whose child I cannot forget hurt mine. Teachers to whom, if these hands had not a life of their own, I would surrender this poem. Still haven't shown it to them. I'm not sure I will. To change this tone just a little bit, Eric mentions my teaching guide, Starting with Little Things, which is on the back table. It's in its 6th printing because I do a lot of workshops with teachers, and they buy it. I've done a lot of those over the years. Here's another book that just came out, and it's not my own, but I do have a poem in it, and it's called The Crafty Poet, a portable workshop by Diane Lockwood. Diane is a poet from New Jersey who has, for several years, had a blog. I've reviewed some of her books in the past. I think she's terrific. She has gotten a real lineup of contributors here with examples of different forms that people might try. You could use this book for yourself if you wanted to get some ideas for new poems or prompts. And then she has interviews with people. I mean, there's a lot of names you'd recognize. Kim Adonisio, Ellen Bass, Catherine Strickling-Bayer, Kelly Cherry, Pat Farinelli, Martha Solano, Marilyn Hacker, just lots of people, and then me. And I was just really happy to get in here. What happened was, she had me write a craft tip, which I did. She asked me to do that, and that's one of the chapters. But then, last winter, she was announcing online that she was going to do this book. And she has had this blog for several years with lots of different craft tips. Well, she needed some examples. So she sent out an email to lots of people saying, okay, here are the prompts prompts that I don't have examples for yet. And if you want to send me an example, I'll put it in the book. So I had fun with it. And my poem is titled Water Over the Dam. You can probably figure out what the prompt is. Well, I'll tell you though. No, figure it out. It's my first time to read it. Water over the dam. To be fair, oh, I do have to say though, this is nobody you know. It's not me, it's not anybody that you know. It's just water over the dam. To be fair, he had it coming. To be fair, he hadn't a clue. To be fair, he never saw it coming. She was a knockout, a bombshell. To be fair, she thought he was her soulmate. To be fair, she could learn to forget and forgive. Truth be told, she didn't put her feet where her mouth was. Hers was the face that launched 1,000 ships. All the tea in China couldn't bring him back. He wouldn't return if his life depended on it. He wouldn't stoop that low. She could eat her heart out and he'd be none the wiser. Before she was a gleam in her father's eye, she'd loved him. Before Adam made Eve, he'd loved her. Love means never having to say you're sorry. He could lie through his teeth and she'd be none the wiser. What was he thinking, living as though there were no tomorrow? How do you let someone just slip through your fingers like that? He wasn't worth it anyway. She wasn't worth it anyway. There are plenty more fish in the sea. It was fun. As you probably have gathered, this was use as many cliches as you can. So I thought, what list of cliches am I going to come up with? Okay, I am going to read something from our time in Mexico last winter. I've got a number of poems that I brought home with me, and I'm reworking them. And this one I just finished reworking today, in fact. It's a poem of place, and I want to say something about that because I'm reading with 3 poets for whom place is very important. And I keep wanting to write more poems about where I am right now. That's a goal. There are many people in here who are doing that very, very well, and I appreciate them. In this world, again this morning, the same tropical mockingbird flits all over this year-round berry-bearing tree, whose name no one can tell me, pouring out every tune its poor DNA-programmed heart can sing. Trills of warblers, trills of canaries, house-finch tremolos, coloraturas of house wrens, and even more birds it couldn't possibly have heard before here in this Yucatan jungle. Heavenly solos that could be taken for glad tidings. Look, the sun, that could be brave refusals to echo my own despair of a world headed down the path of destruction. Bird who only yesterday chased away the larger, fatter, yellow-bellied kiskadee, claiming all these thousands of berries for its very own, though clearly no bird's stomach could have that much room. Cruel bird, whose California cousin I once, years ago, watched peck to death a nestful of newly hatched mourning doves. How can a bird who sings with the voices of cherubim be so selfish, so mean? This I wonder, though I know better. Beauty and goodness are not always on the same team. God bless this bird who knows not what it does. God bless these holy interludes of my forgetting. I have something to pass out, and whatever's left over, I'm going to leave it on the counter there. Some of you may have seen online this last week an announcement that there's a new bridge in Portland that needs a name. It's a footbridge going over the Willamette River. Foot and bicycle bridge, yeah. just heard about this, and I posted it on Facebook and asked people to pass it on, and I hope you are, those of you who've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, I'm giving you the information right here. There is a campaign that just started. I got this information from Paul Ann Peterson, our Oregon Poet Laureate, to name the bridge the William Stafford Memorial Bridge, or just the William Stafford Bridge, which I think is a terrific idea. So here's the website, those of you who have a computer and would like to offer that suggestion to try Met. And there's also a written snail mail address for those of you who prefer the conventional, traditional, sometimes much more reliable way of getting the word to where it's supposed to go. So please take one or more if you know someone who would like to have it. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. I think I'm going to read one or two more poems and then turn this over to Maggie. I think my 20 minutes is close to being up. I am going to, as announced, read a few things, maybe one or two poems from Evensong, which is the most recent poem, or the most recent book. It's divided into three sections. The first section contains poems that are much more personal than in my two previous books that Eric was talking about. These are more family relationships and so forth. And the second section is language and the way we use it and misuse it. And the third part is confrontations with mortality. So, Eric also mentioned music, which plays a strong role in my life, and the book is titled Evensong, Requiem for a Soprano. Somewhere off the coast of Greenland, high in the North Sea, there's a giant white swirl in the water of what can only be thousands, no millions, of icebergs that from this airplane window look no larger than pinpricks, starry white speckles on blue, immense as the night sky without a moon, as though God has taken a giant finger over the water's surface, whirled it white, a whole new galaxy, too new to be named. Song could get lost in a space like this, or fill it. Your voice no longer among us, the gift that was your life echoing. This was for a member of the Motet Singers, a group that I perform with. We are 13 women. We sing a cappella. We have 2 concerts a year. Another one's coming up, December 8th, 4 o'clock in the afternoon at Ebert Memorial Methodist Church. If anybody in Springfield, if anybody wants more information, I'll tell you about it. So one of our members died several years ago, just before Ralph and I were scheduled to fly, and I looked down from the airplane and saw those icebergs. I'm going to read one more from this book. It also deals with singing. It's the last poem of the book, and then I'll conclude with the very new one. And this one was written in response to a call that went out several years ago from the Lane Literary Guild for poems on peace to be published in the little chapel called Dona Nobis Pacem, Give Us Peace. It's titled Sanctuary. It's about singing. As flocks of birds from the depths of the field rise in unison, arc and wheel and dip, with no one bird in the lead, and settle again into land. As fish in their silent schools flash silver together, pivot and pivot again on the same invisible axis. When the music begins and we, in our separate sections, stop that inner, ever-present mental chatter and join together in song. Again, I forget that in the last election, the second soprano next to me almost certainly voted wrong. That in tomorrow's headlines, the next suicide bomber will take away more lives than any one heart can mourn. That in the next town a friend lies dying. That global warming tomorrow will give us yet one more extinction. Here, floodwaters rising will threaten no one. Tenderness rises and is not scorned or shunned. Anger on the horizon crashes and rolls, breaks without mercy over our heads, and no harm is done. What is sacred space if not this shelter of song? What is prayer if not these measures in which the heart can pour itself out, 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 and the notes will catch it, help bear it along? Moments in which each wounded and fragmented self abides again in the wonder of wholeness, here in this place, this home. And the last one I'll read is relatively new, revised just this last week. Some of you may have heard it in an earlier form. And it's dedicated to Dorothy Stafford. The last time here we'd been together, we four. I'm going to interrupt myself. They have a vacation home, not a summer home. The Stafford family has a home in the Sisters area. And Ralph and I were privileged enough to have been their guests on a couple of occasions when Bill was still living. And then this takes place the year after his death in 1993. The last time here we'd been together, we four. We'd slept in their bedroom while they slept under the pines and stars on the outside deck till dawn, when he had risen, as was his custom, and wrote a poem before we even opened our eyes. Now 3 of us were here again, this time with other dear old friends and one new one, the young photographer who'd driven Dorothy from her Lake Oswego home. How cheerful all of us were, how we hugged each other, how we reveled in the view, the fresh, crisp air, talking about our children, reading new poems, all things sunny and bright. And then mealtime came around, the time to toast. Around our group, we could hear the wilderness listen. Dorothy looked at each of us in turn, raised her own glass high. To life, she said. To life, we echoed. And so we toast since then. Thank you.